I'd now like to introduce the next presenter, Mr. Paul Williams, who is the CEO of Auking Mining Limited. Paul has held senior executive and board roles with both mining and exploration companies over the past 20 years. He is a former commercial lawyer, and he brings strong commercial and corporate governance focus to the company. From his experience in the sector and his career as a lawyer and his more recent trips, I know, in person to Tanzania, Paul has really demonstrated an optimism for the market. And as the project moves, we're going to hear more about sort of your ambitions in country and how we're going to see that evolve through exploration and hopefully construction. Very keen to introduce Paul. Thank you.
Thanks, Anna. The diplomatic representatives from Tanzania and Australia, welcome. Dr. Mwanga, welcome. Ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure to give you an update on the activities in Tanzania of Auking Mining Limited. We're an exploration company with projects here in Western Australia, but also looking to develop uranium and copper projects in Tanzania. So it's a little bit of a change of gears from the other presentations you've seen so far. That's a disclaimer, you can see that on the website. So my presentation, I'm going to focus on three primary themes. What's happening in Tanzania at the moment and why we're very excited about being there. The uranium market and plenty of things happening there, and then also some focus on the work that we're actually doing on the ground. So Tanzania, I was really interested the other day when I saw Ethiopia was introduced to the BRICS. And I've heard some commentators suggest that the reason for that was that Ethiopia was identified as a strategically important country. And then I came to think, well, hang on a second, Tanzania, if they're not there already, they're going to be very close to becoming a strategically important country as well. And I think what you've heard already today adds a lot of weight to that. But some of the features of Tanzania, obviously location, you're sitting with deep water port access, pointed at the major markets of India, China, Asia, the Middle East, and Anna made an excellent point as well. A lot of Southern African mining companies and producers have the issue of having to transport minerals and materials across the road and rail and across the various borders. You don't have that in Tanzania. You go straight to the port and out to the markets. In terms of population growth, I was interested that the United Nations mentioned that Dar es Salaam over the next 15 years or so, a little bit less, is the population is going to get to 13.5 million people, up from about 7 at the moment, which makes it one of the fastest growing cities in Africa, if not the world. So Tanzania is looking like a place where there's going to be a lot of growth opportunities which we've identified. In terms of extensional mineral resources, you've already seen the presentations from other companies today. You've got even the bigger groups, the BHPs, the Barricks, the Shells, Exxons, all getting involved in Tanzania. But not just that, but also across a wide range of, it's almost a treasure trove of minerals in Tanzania, where you've got your graphites, your golds, nickel, and a variety of other minerals, and we're putting a hand up in terms of uranium and copper opportunities as well. And the final key aspect of the Tanzania story is actions speak louder than words. I know a few years ago there were some issues around changes to the mining legislation, but since that time there's been a really concerted effort, and it's demonstrated in what's actually happening on the ground. You're seeing, I think there's about 11 framework agreements have been signed between the government and different mining producers. And overall, as you can see from the range of groups that are involved here today presenting, there's an awful lot going on, and I think in a fairly short space of time we're going to see that the pace of growth accelerating. So overall, Tanzania is a place to be. See if I can get that to work. The second aspect of the presentation is what's happening in the uranium market at the moment. It's, as I say there's potentially the best fundamentals in the last 10 years for uranium. And there's a number of factors involved with that, and I don't have the time to go through that, but But even as we speak, when I was doing putting the presentation together, we were looking at a spot price of about 58 US a pound, and now it's about $61 US a pound. That's increased in the last few days. But there's a lot of things happening. There hasn't been a significant amount of exploration and development in uranium projects. Basically, after the Fukushima disaster in Japan in February 2011, a lot of things slowed down considerably. But what you're seeing now is your long-term contracting practices of the utilities is now changing. They're really looking to now secure their position over a longer term, which hasn't been a feature of the uranium market for some years. But one of the stats that really grabbed my attention was the World Nuclear Association, where, as you can see for yourself, you're looking at, at the moment there's about 436 operating facilities across the world, and that's likely to more than double if you take into account reactors that are either under construction, ordered and planned, or proposed. And obviously quite a few of those are in China. India are looking at that as well. But you're seeing countries throughout Europe, either like Japan, for example, that are looking to reopen a lot of their nuclear reactor capacities, and others that are, Sweden, for example, that are looking to start. Unfortunately, here in Australia, we're still dragging the chain, but I think there's just a lot of momentum now towards nuclear-based energy as obviously as a base load energy source. And that sort of turns a little bit to the small modular reactors. There's a lot of that happening in North America at the moment. It's being used in some respects as not just as a niche source power, but also as an ability to provide more attention for, and allow for nuclear power generation to be introduced into economies where it hasn't been before. And then obviously groups like Sprott with their Physical Uranium Investment Trust, they're gearing up, I'm sure, to take a much larger position in the world uranium market. The next slide, I'm paying a full credit to the people at Paladin Energy from a recent slide that they presented, but I thought it was quite a powerful graph that indicates to you what the uranium market's looking like over the next 15 to 20 years, and it looks very much like there's going to be a structural shortage in supply. The interesting feature about this graph is, and credits to the Paladin guys, is that it's excluded the Russian contribution to the world supply. It's about 10 to 12 million pounds per annum. So that's taken out, and so you can already see now there's a shortfall of supply to the demand, and that's only expected to increase over the next number of years. So when you take those factors into play, where Tanzania, uranium market, we think we're in the right space. So in terms of our projects, they're grouped, there's three separate project areas. Mukuju is to the south. Manyoni and Itigi is more in the central part of Tanzania, just a little bit west of Dodoma. And then we've got a copper project, Mapanda, Karima, over to the west near Lake Tanganyika. Now, it's important to note that none of these projects are just moose pasture exploration plays. In the case of Mukuju, and I'll turn to that in more detail in a moment, but that's situated right next door to a world-class uranium deposit called Nyota. Manyoni was a subject of a significant amount of exploration in the early 2000s and has an existing resource estimate around that. So once again, there's established uranium resources there which we're looking to build upon. And even Mapanda, that was a subject up until about the 1960s. There were small-scale copper mines operated over there and some artisanal mines. So there's a base of geological information for us to work in. So and that gives us the opportunity to really focus our exploration efforts. And an important part of the transaction, which I would add, we only acquired these assets at the start of the year, so we've hit the ground running and doing plenty of work at the moment. But an important part of the transaction was the addition of Asimwe Kabunga as our chairman and major shareholder. Asimwe is quite a well-known Tanzanian-born entrepreneur. that he chairs a couple of other very successful ASX-listed companies, Perth-based now, but he'll be a key part of the success of our projects going forward. So Mukuju, as I mentioned before, the really intriguing thing about Mukuju is that it sits immediately to the south and southeast of Niota. Now, Niota was a project that was explored and developed by an ASX and Canadian listed company, Mantra Resources, back in the early 2000s. And they established a resource at Mantra, I beg your pardon, at Niota, of more than 100 million pounds of uranium. And by 2011, I suppose to go back through the time frame, I think they announced the takeover of Mantra by Uranium One in late 2010. Fukushima came along in 2011 February, and the takeover, which was $1.16 billion back in 2011 terms. And even though Fukushima happened, the takeover still continued, and it's been in that Russian Uranium One ownership ever since, and they're looking to move that project along. But obviously, as a Russian-owned asset, we may not see too much of that uranium in the Western markets. But the other important thing that Mantra did was that they created a pathway for us with the work that we're going and currently doing in terms of radiometric surveys across the whole area, not just Niota. And as you can see with the next slide, there's a significant radiometric anomaly across that whole zone. You can see Niota to the top of the screen, and we've got a tenure package of 7 prospecting licences covering an area of about 730 square kilometres, which in and of itself is bigger than our whole package of tenures here in Western Australia. So it's a massive area with these radiometric anomalies screaming at you across the tenure package. And that's the focus of our current activities at Mukuju. We're doing some soil sampling. We've got auger drilling going on at the moment as well. We're looking to do about 3,000 metres of auger drilling across 150 drill holes, which are indicated there on the screen, to targeting radiometric anomalies. So we're looking to have quite a bit of information produced to the market over the next few weeks and months. But we're very excited about Mukuju. As I say, it's situated in an ideal place next to Niota, and we're hopeful that we can bring some good news to the market with that story. The other projects, Manyoni, Itigi, as I mentioned before, Manyoni's had a fair bit of work done to it over the years. Itigi, we've done some drilling there recently, waiting for the assays to come back on that. Itigi's a little bit further west of another 80 kilometres west of Manyoni, but has the ability to significantly increase the Manyoni resources. And then there's the copper assets to the west, where we completed an initial soil and mapping program across some of the areas near Mapanda. Again, waiting for the assay results from the soil samples. But that's a fascinating area. That was, I suppose, when we did the transaction, it was all about the uranium. We brought the copper project in as well, and who knows where that takes us. That's just a quick slide of our West Australian projects. Obviously, that's not the focus of the conference here, but that's what we're doing with the copper zinc project in northeastern WA. Overall, the investment highlights of Orking, with uranium projects that have already had a significant amount of exploration and drilling work undertaken. Mukuju, in particular, sits right next to the world-class Niota deposit. We've got significant in-country Tanzanian expertise and connections, and I think it's fair to say that the uranium market is gaining in significant proportions. Quick snapshot of the board, with a Simway there as chair, an experienced board, and that's some of our corporate details. A typical story with a junior exploration company. We're always looking to spend money on the ground, so we're always looking to raise money to fund that. And then that's just the contact details of us. By all means, come out. I'm sharing a booth with Trevor at Resource Mining Corp outside. By all means, pop in and say hello. And just one thing very quickly. As Anna alluded, I did have the opportunity to go to Tanzania for the first time. If you haven't been there and you get the opportunity, please go. Not just Tanzania, but Southern Africa, because the opportunity to see some of the wildlife in that part of the world is just absolutely stunning, and I can't wait to get back there. So thanks, Anna.